This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to the August 5th, 2019 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. This meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct this public hearings in a relatively informal manner with constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in an order and business-like fashion. I'll note here that all 5 of the items on the agenda tonight are for public discussion. We don't have any public hearing items tonight. There will be opportunities in the future for the public to speak on these items at City Council, and then some of them come back for rezoning and so on, so there will be public hearings at that time. I know there are a lot of members of the public here. We're certainly happy to have this much interest in the items before us today, and I hope that the discussion tonight among the Plan Commission will be educational and help folks out with any future comments they may have on these items before City Council. So I'd like to remind everyone to please turn your cell phones to off or silent. And with that, we will proceed with item number 1, which is a public discussion for recommendation to City Council regarding an annexation at the southwest corner of Old Town Hall Road and Graff Road in the town of Washington. Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Before this evening is a request by the applicant, that's probably my phone, DG Warganis, to petition to annex vacant land to the City of Eau Claire, located on the southwest corner of Old Town Hall Road and Graff Road, as noted by the Chairman. It is item 1 on the overview map. More specifically, it is identified here. You can see the red dash boundary indicates the current city limits, City of Eau Claire, specifically here as it relates to the town of Washington. More zoomed in aerial photo. Again, there are 3 separate parcels totaling 40.83 plus or minus acres of land. Again, these are 3 separate lots. Property is located within the sewer service area of the City of Eau Claire. Water and sewer are available along Old Town Hall Road. A bit hard to see that on the screen, but the blue indicates the water service and the red indicates sanitary sewer. I'll jump back. That just shows the county zoning for the property in question. It's the bright yellow to the middle of the screen there. You can see where the zoning there butts up against City of Eau Claire properties. No land use changes are proposed at this time as a result of the requested annexation. The applicant may want to speak to future plans, but again, Plan Commission's purpose here this evening is to review this as it relates to the future land use plan, the comprehensive plan, access to utilities as noted here, and it's again situation within the sewer service agreement related to its adjacency to the City of Eau Claire. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the Commission?
All right.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen. And this is a public discussion, so I'll ask if there's a motion on this item. Oh, I'm sorry. The applicant, of course. Does the applicant wish to speak? Mr. Radabaugh.
you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me up here, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just came from practice, so I'm a little casual tonight. I guess I really don't have anything to add. Commonweal represents 2 of the 3 landowners for the petition. And I guess I just stand for any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Wolfgram.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
So I am just wondering if there are any prospective plans for development?
There are not, no.
None?
No. We're currently marketing the property. It seems that the annexing in the city gives us the most flexibility and value for the property, so that's why we're here tonight.
Any other questions for the applicant from the commission? Seeing none, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see if there's a motion to approve this recommendation to City Council. Commissioner Peterson,
I'll make a motion to approve for city council.
is there a second? Commissioner Granlund,
I'll second.
thank you. Any discussion on this item? I will note that it's anticipated that this will be back before us for a rezoning in the future, and that will be a public hearing. So, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign? No. 1, okay. Commissioner Christopherson. Okay, item 2 on the agenda is a public discussion for land acquisition on Andy Lane. Mr. Allen.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Again, this is item 2 on the agenda and on the overview map. If we can see it there, at the kind of northwest corner of the map as shown. This is the overview map in terms of the actual property in question. The northeast, approximately, or in general area, the northeast corner of Jeffers Road and Truax Boulevard. City of Eau Claire City Council approved funding in the upcoming capital improvement plan, the 2020 to 2024 CIP for affordable housing. Is related to that, purchase agreement for the acquisition of the parcels as shown has been negotiated in the amount of $150,000. The various parcels that comprise this proposed purchase have an assessed value of $196,900. The purchase of the parcels, of which there are 18 in total as identified here, will be for single-family homes. The parcels will be redesigned or redefined by a new plat or CSM, most likely a replat. These are platted as shown, most likely a replat then in the future. Mr. Chair, as you noted at the beginning of the meeting, again, there's opportunity for further discussion, public hearing fashion, and from the Planning Commission as a result, as it relates to development parameters and such in the future. As it stands here, staff is requesting guidance to be forwarded on to the City Council as it relates to the comprehensive plan. And I'll show that here real quickly. Here's the future land use map. It's essentially that kind of yellow triangle, more or less, south of the railroad tracks and northeast of Truax Boulevard there. Again, that is low-density residential, so what is considered is consistent in staff's view with the comprehensive plan. Did want to show an aerial map. Again, it was not included in your packet, but did want to show the aerial map, especially related to the topography. Again, a large piece of land in total, but again, some topographic challenges there, especially to the north and east. The parcels will include restrictive covenants or deeds to help ensure the property remains in that affordable category. This is the city's first foray into that, assisting with the development of such parcels for affordable workforce housing, particularly in a single-family nature. The restrictions that would likely come forward would be related to the amount the homes could be resold for in terms of any kind of appreciation over a period of time. That period of time and those parameters, of course, are yet to be defined. Same with the sizes of the houses, the lots, and such as they are going to be reconsidered. So those are items to some degree that will come back forward to the Planning Commission at a future date. Again, 18 different parcels are identified here. This would then go forward to the City Council following discussion and recommendation tonight. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. And City of Eau Claire is the applicant? on
Correct,
this?
yes, thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Christopherson?
Thank you, President Larson. Mr. Allen, I thank you for your presentation. I was not able to look at this property. Could you give me some idea of, other than the challenges of topography, is this a wooded area?
Yes, it is. Very, very much wooded currently. There are some openings here and there throughout. Again, as you can see, there is a platted right-of-way. I don't know if there's a mouse, Ryan, that I could kind of point. Thank you. There's a platted right-of-way and some platted lots in there. And again, that kind of goes uphill and kind of skirts along the side of the hill there. So it is, yes, certainly hilly and wooded at the current time. Did have conversations with engineering staff even today, and Ms. Ness could perhaps respond to that as well. But there certainly would be quite a bit of work that would need to occur in terms of providing utilities, redesign where the road would lay and such, especially not just on the west side here, but then perhaps, you know, even further or future connections to the east, as you see some right-of-way with a cul-de-sac to the east there as well.
May I have a follow-up question?
Yes.
What I'm wondering is, if we were to forward this with an approval to council, what is the chance that if you discover that the engineering is so difficult, what would happen? I mean, if it became unaffordable to build because of
Sure.
the topography?
I might defer to Ms. Ness, but I believe, again, there's opportunity for cities approximated 20 to 25 lots or homes that could be identified here. Again, would take some realignment of what you see before you here.
I can add to that too. We have done some initial layouts just to see what items we could look at, looking at the width of the road, potentially having a smaller width road, 30 feet face-to-face with parking on one side. So we're not having as wide of a street. Looking at having just even the lot sizes, Scott had mentioned that for the size of the lots, looking at sidewalk on back of curb if needed to allow for a larger lot. Looking at probably some retaining walls in the area too, but that's something that we'd want to minimize if possible due to the cost of the retaining walls.
Any other questions? Commissioner Wolfgram?
Mr. Allen? So I do understand that additional approvals will be forthcoming. I would like to ask, though, if there has been discussion about what criteria are going to be used to determine the affordability of these single-family homes. Has there been some discussion about that?
Beyond what is in the memo from the Finance Department, nothing specific. Staff is still certainly doing research on that. Hope to have something identified quickly, you know, pending this initial step of the process here. But again, what was identified in there is, again, restricting the resale amount and, again, perhaps limiting, as Ms. Ness even mentioned, size of the lots, size of the homes, so on and so forth. But in terms of, deed restrictions or restrictive covenants,
Purchase price,
how that
or-
would function, that hasn't been identified yet. There are certainly a lot of options.
Could I have a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So in terms of the covenant, have you talked about if the covenant will include restrictions on rentability, a purchaser renting out the home?
That would certainly be one of the criteria that we would be looking at.
Okay.
we've done some research and had conversations with other communities who've done this as well. And, you know, those are certainly some of the issues that we're already investigating, certainly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Gregert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Allen, thanks for all your work on this. And I guess I have a few questions about the forested nature of this area. I've yet to go out and see it, and I'll go out there before the city council meeting. But I guess, do you know like what percentage of this property would remain forested with a development? I know it's very preliminary, but it seems like a good chunk of it would remain forested because it wouldn't be possible to build roads or buildings.
Very good question. I believe there are 14 lots, 13, 14 lots already laid out, and I believe those were, at the time even, were trying to accommodate the current topography and conditions out there, even decades ago. But in terms of the rest of the property, I might defer again to Ms. Ness in terms of any kind of preliminary engineering, I guess, investigation that has occurred.
I don't have a percentage for you, but with the different layouts and looking at the topography and the lot sizes, it would vary. I guess I don't have a good statistical answer for you without doing more layouts and design on it at this time.
I might add, I believe, again, that property to the north and east would most likely be the least desirable and least developed. So as you see the map, I can jump back here. Again, property, as you see those small lots platted, you know, there, and then south and west even, kind of, that whole area would be a lot more desirable for development versus what you see on the kind of the top of the knoll there.
Thank you. Oh, follow-up,
I have a
Mr. Gregor.
follow-up question, thank you. I guess this is related to some of our other planning documents related to kind of more natural spaces in the city. We have the sustainability chapter, and there's the section on environmental conservation where it says, or it's kind of focused on safeguard our ecosystems, trees, soil, and water resources. I guess, has staff looked at how this type of development is in line with our planning documents, particularly on sustainability, and also, you know, we have the carbon neutrality goal as well, and do we count the forest lands that toward our carbon neutrality at this moment?
No, very good question again. I don't want to say it's preliminary, therefore I don't have an answer, but we certainly would take into account the comprehensive plan, all the components thereof as we move forward with the development of this. Again, the positive value of the city acquiring this property means that there's opportunity to ensure a lot of those goals are met through this redesign as we move forward. Absolutely.
Mr. Granlund?
Just a relative comment. Under city ownership, it would have a much better chance of becoming parkland already, as it would owned by anyone else.
Mr. Wolfgram?
Mr. Allen, is the city considering holding this as a land trust in terms of ensuring some affordability, where the home is owned but not the land? There's been some discussion about that,
There has
I
been some
wonder?
discussion.
Okay.
That's certainly one option that is under consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you.
Thank you.
And the City of Eau Claire is the applicant. Is there a motion to approve this item? Commissioner Granlund.
I move that we recommend the purchase of this parcel to the city council.
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram seconds. Any discussion? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to raise some level of concern that this is a pretty, it's a very forested area and represents a lot of, I think, value to the neighborhood that's there already. So I do think that ultimately under city ownership, it's a great advantage in terms of like how many houses will be able to fit there and what exactly that looks like. It'll be good to have that, under, our control as a city. At the same time, it might not be able to be utilized for as many units as was initially proposed when it was voted on by city council to purchase land, and because we were not aware of the particular land that was available at that time, and obviously it does look like a good opportunity for the city in maybe multiple ways other than housing as well, for us to recommend this to council. So I plan to support it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, President Larson. I would agree with Commissioner Gregor. I do see that there is enormous value in the city holding this property. I hope that as the plan and the engineering research goes forward, that there's robust conversation and transparency to the public. Two comments that I would make is, as you look at what can be built there, it may become that condominiums that are multi-family dwelling becomes more cost-effective than single-family homes. The other thing that we've experienced on the west side is exactly what you're showing here, where the wilderness backs up against residential area, and you have this conflict between the public using forested space versus somebody using it for private dwelling. So again, I see this as being an opportunity for the city to be intelligent in the use and the structuring for private versus public interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the commission? Yes. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to Councilmember Christopherson's comment about proposed land use there, I should note that in conversations with the current owner, that has been indicated that the intended use for the property would remain as single-family residential development, which is what is currently zoned. Again, it's not necessarily a explicit restriction in the purchase agreement, but that has been part of the conversations and indications. So I just wanted to make note that that has been part of the conversation, is retention of the single-family zoning.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And item number 3 is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission for a site plan in the Cannery District at 1750 Oxford Avenue. Mr. Allen.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Many of you have seen this project and its various stages up to this point. This is the final site plan approval. There would be one more step. It may not come before the Plan Commission, depending on any kind of public dedication, but a certified survey map, most likely of administrative nature, I should say, is another step before moving forward with construction and such. So this is most likely the final step that you would be reviewing for this project at this point. Again, the request is for this final site plan for Cannery Trail Residences. That's the west side of Oxford Ave between Cameron Street and Maxon Street. It is item 3 on your overhead map here. Showing the proposed layout of 2 buildings northern building and a southern building, the northern being larger of the two. And to back up a little bit, again, what's being proposed here on 1.19 acres, more or less, is 2 3-story apartments. The comprehensive plan does show this as Central Business District. Again, this went through a rezoning process earlier this year for that Central Business District with a P designation, plan development, and had that general development plan approved at the time as well. So if the Plan Commission in its review here finds this site plan consistent with that general development plan, staff would recommend Commission would approve it with the conditions. A few have been identified, both in the staff report and then in the draft kind of approval letter attached to the staff report, as well as engineering items included as well. So Cannery Trail Residences, Inc. is requesting the site plan approval for both the phases of this multifamily residential development. Again, the general development plan was approved with reduced setbacks and reduced parking back in January. The applicant did attach a narrative with further descriptions of both buildings as well as the site overall. Again, the project is a 2-phase multifamily development here in the Cannery District. The first phase would be 71-unit, 3-story apartment building. The second would be 41-unit, 3-story apartment building. Checking through my notes here just to confirm everything as we walk through this. At its last meeting, City Council's last meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, actually, the 5th Monday last week, the Council approved a development agreement with the applicant, as well as a vacation of north-south alley right-of-way and the northern half of Cameron Street right-of-way immediately adjacent to the project there on the south end. This shows the layout with north to the left, south to the right. And I'll show one of the elevations here. We do have some additional elevation drawings applicant may reference during their presentation. So with those vacations as well as the development agreement, project is ready to move forward with this site plan approval. The overall project density is just short of 90 units per acre. Total property size approximately 1.19 acres. The first phase, that northern building, jump back here, is planned as market rate housing, while the second phase, the southern building, is planned as primarily affordable or workforce housing. The applicant describes this as being aimed at residents ranging from 30 to 60% of the county median income. As a condition of the development agreement, the applicant will be applying for the 9% WHEDA low-income housing tax credits this December. Applicant is proposing, as you saw, a modern building design, reflective of the preliminary designs presented with that general development plan approval back in January. The design includes vertical and horizontal articulations with building materials, brick, stone, cement fiber panels, composite wood siding and decking. And as you see there in the corner, translucent polycarbonate panelized features. Part of the purpose of the approved setback reduction is to accommodate, as you can see here, some of the first floor patios and the upper floor balconies. And they're in close proximity both to Cameron, to Maxon there on the right and Oxford on the left. Landscaping and open space, just to highlight that briefly, project does provide for some basic landscape buffering. You can see that there on the left-hand side of the screen. The more of the details are shown on the building 1. The applicant is proposing essentially to mimic those on the second building. Again, it's minimal in nature considering the close proximity to the streetscape, and then potential future redesign of Oxford Avenue as well. As included in the draft draft applicant approval letter. And by the way, I do not sign my name Ryan Petrie. That will be updated later. Unless we're switching today, I don't know. But so ignore that portion of it, but it did note here too that we've requested the final building elevations for both buildings. Again, primarily what you're seeing tonight, what we've seen previously related specifically to the building 1, but again, the applicant can describe further any changes on building 2. Again, primarily it's the same, just a smaller scale. Also requesting that buffers, open space, and street trees be provided as per landscape standards of the code. So when I speak a little bit more too, the open space here, you can see the courtyard area. This is of the north building looking north. You're standing on an east-west, about 12 to 13 foot wide pedestrian greenway. Again, phase 2 would include similar landscaping as you see here. Remaining areas not covered by planting beds or hard surfaces will be seeded or sodded. So street trees have not been specified as noted, but will be required to be installed per city standards. Again, depending on phasing with construction as well as construction or reconstruction of Oxford Avenue. Additional information here provided by engineering is included in terms of grading and drainage, public utilities, and traffic. Should note in there too that specifically related to the garage and the ramp to it, I don't know if Ryan can highlight that with your mouse, kind of where that, thank you, where that's located there off of Maxon Street. It looks a bit inconspicuous there, but should be noted on the overall site plan that it is proposed to be 15% slope, which is the maximum allowed, that 15% grade. And staff have recommended that that be reduced to the maximum extent practicable. Also recommended that be widened so there could be more turning movements and two-way traffic at that location. Again, the applicant can respond to that because as noted even in the general development plan, that parking is quite limited and certainly very tight within that underground parking area. With that, looking through the rest of the notes here, I believe everything else has been addressed, but I'll certainly stand for any questions before I turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Allen? Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Allen, with respect to the entrance ramp to the building, was there any discussion on moving that to the west?
It's a very good
And
question.
away from Oxford Avenue? Because if there's going to be traffic coming in and out of that ramp, Oxford is the one with the most traffic on it, and you're going to get some congestion back out on Oxford.
I may defer to Ms. Ness again, but I believe it was actually located there initially and was moved to the east, but I'm not sure all the rationale for that.
We did discuss the location of the access with them and made sure that it meets the minimum requirements of the comprehensive plan for setbacks from the intersection, but it is pretty close to the intersection. And we had discussed that the further to the west possible, the better for the intersection traffic.
Is minimum different from desirable?
I don't
would
know
be-
how it's worded in there, but
Depends on who you
In
ask.
that,
Maybe.
even though they may have designed the building already, you know, whether you get the ramp on the east wing of, or the east side of the building, east end or the west end, it's pretty much the same in the basement. It'd just be flip-flopped. And I think it would be much, much safer if it was on the west side.
the applicant may have a reason, there, it was switched. And I believe there was a reason why it was switched, and they may have an answer for that.
Okay. And is there a depiction of the necking of Oxford at Mason, or Maxon and Cameron, correct, where it's going to neck in?
We
And-
have not fully designed Oxford or Maxim, but we do plan to move forward with design similar to Barstow and Graham Avenue with the bump outs to limit the pedestrian crossing widths and to have that pedestrian feel through there.
One of the other concerns I had was with Oxford being the volume of traffic that it is, that those patios on the first floor, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of railing between them and the sidewalk. It'd be nice, it could still be decorative, but have it maybe prohibit vehicles from crashing through them. More of a barrier, but still be decorative
Right.
at the same time.
A very good point. I believe they're showing that here. One of the other drawings may show it a little bit better on the left-hand side. You can see some of the kind of fencing or screening there. Well, I guess the strength of that or the sturdiness of that, I'll defer to the applicant in terms of how that's being designed. And I think if I'm right in saying, Leah, that I don't think it's been determined whether it be on-street parking, either Maxon or Oxford at this point.
It hasn't.
Because they're showing that right now.
It's showing that. I guess our preliminary thought was that it would be no parking from Madison to the Cameron Street right-of-way.
Okay.
And then beyond that, there may be parking.
Okay. But that hasn't been, so that what they're showing is not a final
Right.
section
But
of either Maxon or Oxford.
It'd be nice if they're going to have barriers between the patio and the sidewalk, you can make reinforced concrete and steel look very, very nice and still be functional.
Sure. Very good.
Further questions from the commission? Mr. Allen? Commissioner, who wants to go first? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you. I want to continue with a question about the traffic. In the packet materials, it said that staff doesn't see that there'll be any impact on the Oxford traffic with 70 units added at peak times. And I'm just wondering what kind of study we've done. This is one of my regular routes to downtown, and the traffic regularly queues up at Madison all the way back to that Cameron Trail. So in my way of thinking, it would pretty regularly impact. So I'm just looking for that larger picture.
I can tell you, we are having a Cannery District study, traffic study done. We've taken counts at the major intersections through the area. We're looking at doing coordinated signal timings along Madison Street, which should help the queuing at the traffic signals. And then also as an outlet from Maxon Street, there's multiple outlets instead of just using the Oxford Avenue. So I anticipate that residents from this area, if they're leaving during the peak period, they'll know that they want to go to Bellinger to the north or take an alternative route, the one of least resistance for their path that they're trying to make.
May I have a follow-up?
May.
So along that same logic of managing traffic flow, is there any possibility that as part of this whole picture, we could also look at the way entrance and exit from Quick Trip happens so close to Madison Street, or is that kind of off the table?
I have not discussed that further with Quick Trip, but it may be something that we could bring up to them in discussion if they'd be willing
Thank you.
to look at it further.
Commissioner Greigert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Allen, I had a question about the Cameron Street part of this. Obviously, we approved the vacation of half of the street to the north so that this could be a little bit larger project. And one of the things we discussed was the connectivity up to the road part of Cameron Street on to the west, or at the intersection of Mappa and Cameron. And it sounded like we could fit some sort of pedestrian connection between Oxford Avenue and Mappa Street to connect Cameron, but it would require a staircase. And I guess I'm wondering if the city would plan on trying to achieve that as part of this project or in conjunction with the project, and whether the city would cover that full cost, or that would be considered assessed upon the properties. adjacent.
Good question. I may defer to Ms. Ness again as well on that. I don't think it's included, I know it's included in, bike ped plan as a connection, but in terms of actual construction, I'm not sure if it's actually included in, CIP or future considerations.
Yeah, I would have to defer to a future response, but the Maxon Street and Oxford Streets are being planned for the 2020 CIP reconstruction projects. As a part of that, I don't know if we would construct the trail and if that would be part of the street construction or if it would be a trail, part of the Parks Trail System CIP funding, or included with the Oxford project.
But certainly, yeah, future or soon-to-be considerations for that connection there.
Correct.
And I know in terms of the bicycle connection, again, a likely diversion would be towards Maxon rather than through this part of Cameron.
Thank
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner?
Well, I guess the follow-up would be, you don't know for sure whether it would be something that would be, any of the cost would be assessed to neighboring property owners, if that would be part of the improvements through the tax incremental
Yeah.
district, or if it would be part of another capital fund within the city.
That's a good question. I don't know if the,
I don't have an answer right now. That's something we
Yeah.
can get back to you on.
Okay.
and as we're saying, it sounds like more likely to be part of a trail connection rather than a street improvement. So that
Okay.
can be a differentiation there in terms of assessment as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Allen from the commission? Seeing none, is the applicant here? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Ryan is passing out the updated renderings of the building. My name is Tyler Warner. I'm with W Capital Group. We're very excited to begin this project. We've been working on it for almost a year now. Phase 1 is going to be a very attractive product, market rate housing, 71 units. Phase 2, we're going to be doing affordable housing. If there are any questions for me specifically on timing or anything in regards to Phase 2 on the affordable side, I can answer those. And then Ryan can take over any of the design questions that you guys had during the discussion period.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. I've been a very enthusiastic supporter of this development from its inception. My question has to do with the timing of the WIDA tax credits. And is it okay if I ask two questions in succession?
Yes.
Thank you. Is the TIF enough to complete both phases without the WIDA tax credits?
So the WIDA tax credits are only for Phase 2.
Right.
We're going to be applying for those in December. We feel like we have a leg up on any other applicants that are going to be applying in Eau Claire. The more applicants, the better, because we obviously need the affordable housing downtown. We're going to apply in December, and we find out in March if we get them. And what we're doing to make our application very strong is diversifying the capital stack. There's points, there's scoring within the 9% round of application. And as long as we can have TIF, as long as we're getting a good price from the city for the land, as long as WIDA knows that we've been working with the city for, a year, and they know it's going to be kind of a diverse community with market rate in Phase 1 and a lot of affordable aspects in Phase 2, that brings our application very strong on the scoring. So we find out about 4 months after we apply in December. Does that answer your question?
Not quite.
Okay.
So if you were not awarded the WIDA tax credits, then what would happen to phase two?
So phase two, as in the development agreement, we're still going to be looking for other ways to provide affordable housing for phase two. I think, I can't say 100% that we're going to get the credits, but I'm pretty confident that we will, given my communication with WIDA so far. If we do not, we are going to be providing some affordable aspects in phase two, just not 100% of the 41 units. Yep.
Thank you.
Did you have a second question?
So would an option also be if you didn't get the WIDA, and let's say that other options fell through for phase two, would it be possible that you would set aside a certain percentage of phase one for affordable?
So phase one is going to start construction in 3 weeks, if we can get approval today. So we have financing, we have all of the money raised, we have
Okay.
contracts that we've already been signing
Okay.
with a bunch of different people. We're trying to get that in the ground just to show kind of WIDA that we're taking this and gentrifying and making the area a very good area. So we need to get in the ground in like 3 weeks to make phase one roll, and then phase two will look even better on the application.
So it sounds like you're doing everything you can to make phase two happen.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Rager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Warner. I guess this was maybe a bit more on the construction, so not sure if you'll want to answer this, but I was intrigued by the bicycle parking in the lower level, and looks like there's room for almost 100 bicycles.
Yeah,
or
phase
actually
one
more
has
than
71, and then phase
Yeah.
two has over 50.
Yeah, so I guess I've never like lived in an apartment building, and really seen too many examples of bike parking in this nature. So can you describe maybe how someone would use that bike parking, how they would enter the building, or would they go down the ramp just as a car would, or?
Yes, one or two ways, the ramp, yes, there's actually a door next to the garage door ramp that they can enter and slide down the ramp, the car ramp. Or they could simply bring their bike into the building and then use the elevator to go down to the basement. Or if they want extra exercise, they can put it on their shoulder and go down the stairs.
Okay. So I guess a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I see, like, there's phase one has a bike parking area that appears to be enclosed with a door, and it has a bike maintenance area, and then in the second phase, it appears to be a bit more open, or for the bike parking. So what's the difference between those?
The second phase is more diagrammatic. We didn't flush out the details as much in the second phase.
Oh, okay.
And so ultimately, yes, when we really refine those details, the second phase bike parking, similar detail to the first, as it's enclosed and locked. There probably will be a bike maintenance next to it, or maybe that the one that's there might be sufficient enough. But yes, the plan is for that second phase to have enclosed bike parking. Yeah.
One more follow-up? That'd be
Sure.
okay. And that's related to, so when people have a car parking space, are they going to be paying extra for that? But if they have bikes, will there be a charge for bicycle parking?
No, there's no charge for bikes. So phase one will have parking be kind of a la carte market rate housing, right? Phase two, there's a parking spot designated for that unit, and we can't charge extra for that for the
okay.
affordable units. So
Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes. Was the ramp originally proposed on the east side of the north
Yes.
facade of the building?
And the reason was we laid it out that way before we knew what the utility arrangement was and where the utilities were laid. Once we got that utility survey, we realized everything's basically on Oxford, and it made more sense to flip the ramp. And because we flipped the ramp, we were able to nestle the utility room right next to it, because if you look at the basement plan, there's kind of less space next to it. So it made sense to flip it so we didn't have to route the utilities all the way across the site to the west side. So it did save costs and also saved parking as well, because if we flipped it and kept the utility room, or we kept the ramp on the west side and the utility room on the east side, we would probably lose 10 parking stalls. It's just the way that it worked out. That, or we would have to get rid of the courtyard, because the ramp would infringe, break up the courtyard.
In that the building is L-shaped or U-shaped?
U-shaped, yep.
I don't see how the ramp infringes on the courtyard, but
Well, there's a section in there that could articulate where that would happen. It wouldn't be all the courtyard, but it would be probably a good 25% of the courtyard, because you need your headroom, and as you go down, you can reduce that. But that reduction is happening inside the building now versus in the courtyard if we didn't flip the ramp. So the courtyard would be impinged a little bit. We did, talking to Ms. Ness, we did talk about, relocating on the east side and introducing at the intersection sidewalks that kind of constrict into the intersection to kind of slow traffic down. And also to, I think the minimum code, or zoning code requires is 50 feet back from the intersection. I think we're 55 or 60, so we didn't push up to the minimum, so there is a little room there. And our hope is, because we did the constricted bell pattern at the intersection, that we address the safety concerns of that ramp being a little closer to Oxford as well. So,
okay, thank you.
Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. My question is, they're just curiosity things, but they may have to do with the design. This is the first time that I've seen that white paneling on the third floor. What is that going to look like on the?
you have the material board right there. It's actually the base of that material board is the material. It's a polycarbonate material. It's essentially a plastic. It's very durable. You can actually use it in Miami, withstands hurricane force impacts.
So is that a public space that's on, where this paneling is being used, is it a public space, or does it?
It's
Yeah.
a unit. This would be the living room of that unit.
Oh, so they're going to have this.
So it lets light in, but you can't necessarily see through it, type
Nice.
of thing. It has double insulated value of glass because of multi-cell thickness to it.
That's lovely. I have two other questions, if I can just.
Sure.
So I've been curious really since the beginning, when we saw these plans, on an east-west orientation, that public space, that's shared space at the interior. I'm just wondering, with the three-story building, what's the light situation? What's the natural light in there? Seems like it's going to be kind of dim.
Well, it's a relatively, living in Chicago for a number of years, this is gracious, but around here it is a little tight. As you can see, we've done some solar studies, and light does get down in there.
Okay.
So I guess it's right on the midpoint, I guess, in my experience, between being too tight and being too open of a courtyard.
Well, that you did solar studies gives me assurance, and then in that picture where you're showing the plantings, that's obviously getting enough from the direct overhead.
Yep.
Okay.
These will be planters of some sort.
Right.
They won't be, ultimately, we're proposing turf here over the courtyard, because if we put over the basement, we have the precast, and if we actually plan for planting something there, we would really need to beef up the precast because of that soil weight to it. So here we're just proposing just artificial turf, which seems to be kind of the rage nowadays. And then just planter boxes and maybe some decorative stones, to mimic a Zen garden of some sort.
So my last question, inquiry would be, because of the location of this project, close to downtown, it's close to the High Bridge where people are moving pretty easily, I'm just wondering about whether or not there's some privacy. In my own mind, I'm going between, open and public versus a little bit private to prevent people from just entering and hanging out in that public area from the outside.
Well, right now, there's no planned gate into that courtyard. There certainly could be. Right now, the idea is it's open, and ultimately, every unit on the first floor would have their own individual locks, of course, and I'm sure that there's going to be a set of blinds for privacy and whatnot.
I'm thinking we're going to put a gate with a fob access there,
Oh.
like a 8 to 10 foot
Yeah,
high
okay.
gate, so no one can just go in the middle of the courtyard at night.
So I need to write that down.
Right there. So in my last, this is just very exciting. The west side is just really waiting to be enlivened by this kind of development. And one of my constituents who has a son who has taken advantage of affordable housing, and she said, Jill, we want to make sure that this is affordable housing and not cheap housing. And I'm appreciating the things that you're paying attention to.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess another question related to bike parking would actually be for visitors, and what the plan would be for how a visitor would access a place to park, or if that's something that would be more in the streetscape, and if that's currently planned as part of the streetscape. It might be a staff question to an extent too, because I know that we're paying for some of those amenities. But
Yeah, so the plan here is to figure out like the parking needs for phase one as they come in and as they lease, and then hopefully we'll be able to take 2 to 4 of the spots and make those visitor spots, and then have those be signable by night, and have like that be like free for one night, and then if a visitor comes for an extended stay, like 3 to 5 days, then they'd have to pay the management company like $5 a day or something like that. So we really have to look at the parking, because right now we have 68 parking stalls for 71 units. And then for phase two, we have 41 units and 57 stalls. So there's more parking available in phase two. So if there's kind of an overflow, which is why it's so important to get phase two in the ground right when we finish up phase one. So if there's any shortage of parking in phase one, we can have a couple of the spots in phase two take over that. But the plan is to do hopefully 2 to 4 flex spots that are available for visitors, because there's,
Yep. There's also on-site bike parking right here.
Oh, there.
And
Okay.
I don't know offhand how many it is. I think maybe 8 or 10. I can't
Oh,
remember.
okay. Yeah, that was my main question, was the bicycle
Okay.
parking. So there will be bike parking outside?
Yes, they will.
Okay. Thank
Do
you.
have the site plan. I think it's on the site plan, the architectural one.
Yeah, I can look that up.
Any further questions for the applicant? Don, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a motion for approval of this site plan with conditions? Commissioner Christopherson,
I move to approve the site plan.
Mr. Seymour,
Thank you. Second?
any discussion? Commissioner Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really support this project. I do have one concern that was raised by staff regarding the grade of that ramp at 15% and whether that could be changed. And then also just the width of that driveway access, so I guess it may be a question to staff whether that's something that would require a motion to include with the letter of staff recommendations, or if that's kind of an implied request at this point.
I think we can include that in the letter that we send out for the commission plan site
Okay.
review.
Thank you.
We need to make that part of the motion, or is that something that just happens?
Yeah, we can just include that in the letter.
Okay.
Great.
Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Thank you, and that motion passes. Congratulations. Item number 4 is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission for a site plan at 3205 and 3211 Fairfax Street. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Chairman. Before you is a site plan approval for a property that's currently zoned R3 multifamily, located on the southeast side of a town, number 4 on the map. Parcel is off of Fairfax Street, mid-block, across from single-family residential on the west side, the town of Washington on the south side, multifamily on the east, and multifamily on the north. Again, the parcel is zoned R3, currently 1.5 acres. The comp plan shows the area as medium to high-density residential. The current land use is vacant, and the proposal before you is 2 townhome-style apartments. This would be facing Fairfax Street along the street. Building 1 is 3 stories, building 2 is 2 stories. Here's the site plan showing the landscape plan, the current buffer to the south and to the east. I would note that this site drops off from the road back to the east and to the south. The applicant is Advanced Engineering Concepts on behalf of the owners. Again, they're proposing 2 townhome-style buildings that Eau Claire doesn't have very many of these, I may note. The site plan shows 2 buildings at approximately 8,300 square feet. Building A, which is the northern building, is again 3 stories with 15 units. Each of the units have ground floor, 2-car garage. This is elevations showing the drop-off like I mentioned. It's heading to the east and southeast, and the retention areas on the far east side. Here's a kind of a busy map on there's the floor plans of each of the units. Again, some of the units of what their first floor, second floor, and third floor would look like on the building A. Again, building A, the first floor is a 2-car garage. The second floor would be living, kitchen, dining, and bathrooms. The upper floors would include washer and dryers, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Moving on to building B, which is the southern building. It's 2 stories, 16 units. The first floor is a 1-car garage. The upper floor is a living room, kitchen, washer and dryer, bathroom, and bedroom. Each of the units in buildings A and B have a little patio area about 60 square feet, entrance off the rear. So here's an elevation showing the step back in the buildings, showing the garages in the middle, and then the entry off the rear. Most of the time, the townhome styles, usually you enter from the garage, so that you'd pull your car in the garage and then you would go up to your unit. The floor plan shows it pretty well as well. Each of the part of the building is stepped back as you go from west to east, and that's due to the elevation changes. Let me go back to the site plan. Shows a 30-foot wide driveway from Fairfax Street Down and through the site would be a common driveway. There would be no parking along it. They are proposing 3 guest parking stalls, surface lot on the far east side of the parking. The parking requirements would be based on the bedroom count, which is 1 per bedroom. They would be required 46 stalls. They're providing 57 stalls. The additional parking would be used for storage, guests, and also some tenants may need more than 1 stall in the building B. The site plan, like I mentioned, does offer the 3 surface stalls for guest parking. A sidewalk connection is shown from each of the buildings to Fairfax Street. Exterior lighting shall meet the city design standards. The bicycle parking shall be provided within the units, which would be in the garages. The site plan does note open space at 48%. I would note the building facade does show a brick frontier facing Fairfax Street. Staff did note that there, with the patio areas, not sure if the applicant is proposing some kind of screening in between, but there seems to be potentially a lack of privacy in between the units on the rear. The site does propose some challenges. It is more of a skinnier, long, it's about 120 feet along Fairfax Street, and it goes back almost 500 feet approximately. Again, it's 1.5 acres in total. The landscape plan does show foundation plantings, street trees, the existing trees along the south property line and east property line. They appear to be maintained and staying there on site. As I noted before, the grading and drainage of the site goes back from west to east and into a retention area. The public utilities are available at this site. The traffic is noted in your report. Transit does have 2 service stops on Fairfax and Skills Avenue, and it may generate some traffic, transit traffic. Again, here's the front of the building. The landscape plan, as mentioned, maintaining the trees to the south and to the east. They are providing foundation plantings and street trees. With that being said, again, most of the access would be from the garage to the units. Staff did look at this and had some questions about that. I have lived in a townhome similar to this, and it's great for safety. It's also good to have secondary access. The only concern that staff ran into, and Scott and I talked about it earlier, was what happens if your garage doesn't open? And that is, we're not 100% sure, but usually you can have battery backup or a generator backup garage doors. Not sure if this project will have that. In the community, we do have a few buildings similar to this, but they're usually smaller units, smaller density. There's a couple examples we thought about. It appears to meet all of the multifamily design manual standards that we have currently in the city. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Petrie, the doors that face to the west toward Fairfax Street, do those just reach those individual units on the end, and there's no like interior hallway connection to other units, is that right?
That's my understanding.
Commissioner Wolfgram.
Is the applicant here to speak to questions?
The applicant here is the property owner here, and the architect and engineer are all present.
My questions would be to the applicant.
Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you will hold those for a little bit
Yes,
here.
thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Petrie? All right, thank you. And the applicant, who wishes to come forward? Thank you. Could you give us your name and?
John Benin. Will be one of the co-owners of the property.
just like to add that we are having individual doors going into each unit. There's little vestibules between the garages there. On the top one, the little doors between the garages, it's like a little vestibule, so it'll go to the right unit and the left unit. So all the units will have their own individual doors going from the garage door. Same with
Okay.
the southern building too. But they got their own little individual entryways.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Can you pronounce your last name again? I didn't quite get it.
Benin?
Benin.
Yep.
Mr. Benin, thank you.
Thanks.
It's a very, very attractive design. So I understand that this is a privately funded and developed project.
Yep.
I also know that Fairfax area quite well, and it's home to quite a few working people and a lot of lower income people. And so, and I wanted to request that my comments could be in the minutes. That's okay?
Without objection, that's fine. Yep.
So I wanted to know if there had been any discussion at all amongst you about affordability of this project, given that ultimately, from my perspective, it will have some impact on the neighborhood, which again is home to a lot of lower income people and a lot in a lot of the multifamily developments that are around there. So I just wanted to ask you if there had been any discussion at all about either voluntarily setting aside a couple of the units to be more affordable, or, somehow determining your rents to be affordable. I just wanted to know if you had some
Yeah.
discussion about that.
Yeah, we did. The south building being only 2-story, we originally had planned on that being 3-story, and then doing the same thing as the north building, which would have been a 2-bed, 2.5-bath. Of course, that's more expensive. That would probably be like in the $1,400 to $1,600 range per month, and then the south building would be like $900 to $1,000. That's the way it is right now with just the 1-bedroom. So that's affordable for somebody, just getting out of college and having a decent job and making like average salary in Eau Claire.
Can I follow up?
Of course.
So, from what we know, and we've talked a lot about what's called the Alice Report in Eau Claire County, which is asset limited, income constrained, but employed people. And a lot of those folks live in that neighborhood. And so 46% of our residents in Eau Claire are working and struggling to pay the rent, particularly in that neighborhood. So those rents are very high for 1, 2, and 3-bedroom. So I just want to go on the record as saying that with those rents as high as those are, it's my perspective that it could have an impact on rents going up in that particular neighborhood. And I would just ask you to consider even setting aside 2 or 3 of those units to be a little bit more affordable, to at least consider that, to at least be open to consider that.
Well, the 1-bedrooms, if a younger couple shared that, they'd split the rent, so it'd be 900 divided by 2, 450. So that's affordable for someone even making less than $15 an hour. I mean, and they could share that garage, because there's the flex garages. There's 1 garage per unit, but we got the flex garages next to the units, so they could park their 2 cars in garages and still have a nice 1-bedroom apartment that they share between the 2 of them.
I just wanted to go on the record with that. Just given that particular neighborhood, there's a lot of low-income people living there. And the impact of those rents eventually on some of those rents in the surrounding multifamilies eventually going up as a result of that. So I hear you, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Applicant, Mr. Greger.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Benin. Yes, I was wondering about the garbage and recycling areas and how that's going to be handled for the whole property and for pickup and storage and everything.
Yeah, I talked to local garbage supplier or service company, and they're willing to drive down the driveway and pick up everybody's container. So we'll pay for the service as a whole. So it'll be one company that services every unit, and they'll all have their own individual container that they'll bring out of their garage and then on the garbage pickup day. So there's not multiple garbage trucks that are going to be driving down there. Just be once a week.
Thank you. That's another
Okay.
question.
Sure.
For visitors who may be coming on a bicycle, do you plan any outdoor bicycle parking, maybe at the front of the building by Fairfax Street?
We just planned on like the visitors parking in the garages of the person they're visiting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be open to installing a bike rack in front?
Yeah, if there's room. I mean, we could probably put it up next to the sidewalk somewhere.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Don't see any. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
All right, is there a motion to approve this site plan at 3205 and 3211 Fairfax Street with conditions? Mr. Peterson.
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan.
Thank you. Commissioner
Second.
Seymour, is the second. Any discussion? Commissioner Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have concerns about this design because it's, it requires for people to walk to the units, they have to walk down a driveway essentially to get to most of them. And it is good to see that there is obviously a way to go through a door rather than a garage door to enter them, but it's still problematic to me. I don't really see myself supporting this project for that reason. I think it could be designed in such a way to provide more pedestrian safety and access that would just be more appropriate for the type of development it is. I do think it's actually a relatively nice looking set of buildings, but it just seems to be just not the right design for not the right layout that I would feel comfortable with. So not sure what others' thoughts are.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Same sign?
No.
Okay, we have 2 in opposition. And that motion passes. Congratulations. The last item, item number 5, for public discussion, is approval by the Plan Commission for a site plan for Associated Bank at 2520 Mall Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you is redevelopment of the old Hancock Fabric Building at 2520 Mall Drive. That's number 5 on the map as shown. Here's the site with the existing building. It most recently was the Halloween Express store, and before that was the Bargain City store, and before that was the Hancock Fabric building. Currently has been vacant for some time now. Just south of Claremont Avenue, Mall Drive to the east and London Road to the west. They're requesting a site plan for the Associated Bank to be relocated to this site. It's currently located south of here. They've outgrown that location and they're looking to demo this this existing building and build a brand new bank branch building at this location. The site plan does note a varying square footage between 2,800 and 3,600 square feet with two teller drive up and ATM machine. Building elevation and narrative is in your report. This is showing the building, the brick facade with glass. They also are doing the tower. Associated Bank is known for that tower with a sign on top of it. Approximately 30 feet. The other building, or the building is 1 story in nature. Again, here's showing the elevations. The west elevation would be facing London Road. The site would be demoed again, like I mentioned, and ripped up with concrete. Would be replaced with the building, the drive-through. They are showing some cross-access and shared parking with the neighbors to the south. Technically not required, but the applicant is showing that at this time. They are showing a driveway onto London Road and a driveway onto Mall Drive. The main entrance would be in the front to the west here, sidewalk connection out to London Road. The site plan does show 25 parking stalls. The requirement for this site would be 18 stalls. The site plan does note 2 bicycle stalls and should meet the required of the city. The proposed driveway is a 24-foot wide shared driveway with the parcels to the south, like I mentioned. Exterior lighting shall meet the city design standards. The landscape plan does note foundation plantings along with street trees, other trees scattered throughout the site, and a significant improvement to what is currently there, which is mostly asphalt and concrete, I may note. In your report is the grading and drainage for the site, the public utilities, the existing utilities on site as well, the traffic report, and again, this is along a transit route that may have some demand. There is some conditions they need to meet. They have not submitted a utility plan or a grading plan. An engineer would need to review those along with the stormwater calculations. With that being said, I would be standing for any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you. Mr. Petrie, I have to say that when I was trying to read this part of the agenda, it kept crashing, so I wasn't really able to see. What is the surface along that, the dotted one? What is that surface?
My understanding that's all grass area. So they're
Excellent.
ripping up the entire
Yeah.
asphalt with grass.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Petrie? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Petrie, I corresponded a bit over email on this. The issue of pedestrian connectivity, obviously there are some challenges with this site in general because there's not a lot of sidewalks on London Road and there's kind of a gap. So I appreciate the connection on the London Road side, and I think that's good, but how do you see the possibility of having a connection from Mall Drive where there is a sidewalk as well on the east end of the property, and then it's also a dead end, so this would provide some connectivity from a dead end to the business?
Absolutely. So the applicant is present as well. What I could see potentially happening, and go back to the site plan, you see the main entrance, we try to get the customers to come here. If they could somehow connect this sidewalk, potentially go like that, that is added a significant amount of concrete. I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. It is up to the plan commission to decide if that is required. The other option they could do would be stripe along the side of the driveway, potentially would be an option. I would defer that the applicant, that'd be an excellent question for the applicant as well. They want most of the people to enter the front door of the bank branch here. Traffic-wise, they could come from both, but yeah, that's a good pedestrian question for the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Petrie? Thank you, Mr. Petrie. And does the applicant want to come forward? You want to come up? Thank you. And if you could just give us your name and who you're representing.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Kerr. I'm with Rinka Architecture, 756 North Milwaukee, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we are the architects of record for Associated Bank.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant, Mr. Kerr? Mr. Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kerr, curious as to what you'd think about an easterly sidewalk connection along the north of that driveway, which is, I guess I would consider it wanting to have a comparable way of getting there by car as well as by foot safely. So, wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we could entertain. I would probably put it on the south side rather than the north side, just for two reasons. One, to reduce the amount of impervious surface area that we're creating, since we do have the cross-site easement that's required there. And that's just a little bit nicer walk there with there's a little bit more landscaping on that side. So, but yeah, we could certainly accommodate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicant? None. Thank you, Mr. Kerr.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there a motion for approval of this item, a site plan for Associated Bank, 2520 Mall Drive? Commissioner Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to approve the site plan, but I would like to add the addition of a sidewalk connection to the east, however they see appropriate and staff feels in agreement with, so that it would connect from Mall Drive to the building.
Good. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Wolfgram. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. Is there, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, that motion passes. Congratulations. And that concludes the items for us. Otherwise, are there code compliance items? Seeing none, are there any discussion of future agenda items? Additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.